Hello everyone. I want to show you how to prepare your applique shapes for sewing. What I've done is cut out the applique templates that I printed on freezer paper and pressed the freezer paper template to the right side of the fabric. The next thing I will do is to finger press all the edges under all the way around. Now I'm turning the seam allowance to the back of the fabric. When you get to that outer point, finger press beyond the point in both directions. The next thing I'll do is take my glue, and this is the Quilter Select fabric glue stick, and I'm also going to use a wooden cuticle stick that's flat at both ends. Now, what I want to do is take a little bit of the glue and apply it to the seam allowance right there at the point, and I'm going to fold the point in. I don't want to see the freezer paper. I want it to turn under right at the end of that point, just like that. And I went ahead and finger pressed several leaves at once and turned under their points. So I've got this one ready to go. The next thing I would do here is I would finger press this end under. I want to do my best to get that turned under even with the paper. All right, then I'm going to turn this over. Using the cuticle stick, I'm going to grab a little bit of the glue, just the tiniest little bit, and I'm going to stick that under the seam allowance. Whoops, and I'm going to get that in position. And then I'm going to move down, half an inch, give or take, and I'm going to pinch the glue between the seam allowance and the applique fabric. Now, let me pull this in a little closer. While the glue is still moist, if I've turned under too much, I use what I refer to as the clean end of the cuticle stick to manipulate it. Then I'm going to go back to the gluey end of my glue stick, and I'm going to do that. And what I'll do is several spots, 3/8 of an inch to a half an inch, give or take. And then I'm going to go back and stick these down. And what that does is, especially on this outer curve, it eliminates the pleats that might otherwise form if I worked in a straight up linear fashion. So I'd come back, add a little more. All right, you get the idea. So I would do all of this side. Next, I would pick up the leaf I've formed, and I want to finger press under the second side of this point. Just like that. I want to finger press it real good. Now there's no glue on there yet, and I have already finger pressed the rest of this side. So I'm just refining that point. Then I'm going to take some more glue and glue the point. All right. And I'm going to catch a little bit there. Now I need to refine that just a bit. Before I go too much farther, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of glue, and I'm going to pull that edge of the folded under seam allowance away from the finished edge of the leaf, because when I stitch this on the sewing machine, I'm going to be right to the outside, and I don't want any of that turned under seam allowance to spew out and be visible. So I'm just going to make sure it's pulled back, and then I would work my way on down this leaf just the way I worked my way up the other side. Once I have everything glued, I generally leave the freezer paper on the top until I'm ready to position it on the border background, or if I was doing this on a block, before I put it on the block, because it makes it easier to move these into position. Once they're in position on the border, then I would take off the freezer paper and finish pinning if I'm going to also use pins. All right, that's how you handle the leaves. Next, I'll show you how to do the inner point on the round frond. I'm back to show you how to handle these longer fronds on these side borders. I've already finger pressed under all the way around and back out, and I've glued the long straight edges because they are as easy to turn under and glue as the leaf edges are. And the same thing is true for this larger outer curve. You do it the same way you did the curved side of the leaves. You glue about every 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch, and then you go back and you ease in the spaces in between so that you get a nice smooth edge. The trickiest part with this shape is the inner point and the inner curve that's right next to the inner point. I'm going to show you again how I finger press this part, because as you go around this curve, you can really only use the fingers of one hand. And as you get to the inner point, don't be afraid to crease the paper just a little bit so that you can crease right up into that inner point. If you don't do the finger pressing, it's harder and slower to turn the edges under. So it's worth taking this step. And I've glued about to the place where I need to clip that inner point. So I'm going to take my very fine scissors and I'm going to clip down the center. I want to clip just a little bit shy of the line. I'm sorry, shy of the inner point. I'm also going to need to clip this inner curve. Don't clip all the way to the paper. And I'm keeping my clips about 1/4 of an inch apart. That works for this fabric. If I had a tighter weave of the fabric, I might have to clip deeper and more frequently. That ought to work right there. I set my scissors aside. Now, to glue this, it's the same tools, the same glue. I'm going to come in here and pinch that under. Oh, and I turned it way too far. So I'm going to ooch that back just a little bit. And then very carefully, I want to turn under that edge. Now there's not much seam allowance there, so don't get too exuberant in your turning. Got a fuzzy thing right there. And I'm going to use my fingernail and get that side over. Now can you see that I'm using the gluey end of my cuticle stick to help move those little thread hairs into position? And I'm going to come back and add some glue here to finish out this curve, the outer curve. I could use the appliqué rods for this, but honestly, I have found that the wooden cuticle stick works the fabric very well, and then I don't have to worry about getting my appliqué rods all gluey, although I'm sure they would clean up well. All right, I'm going to turn this under. Now what will happen here, really at the end of all of these clips, even your deepest one, is that the fabric is going to spread open, fray open just a bit to give you some give there. And here at the deepest part of the V. Here I'm going to use the clean end of my glue stick and encourage that to pull in. And then I'm going to come back and hit those threads with just a little bit more fabric glue. Now this is not the way I would hand applique this point, but I'm not hand appliquing, I'm machine appliquing. And there's not another good way to handle this seam allowance and keep it turned under for machine applique. And that is how you do it. Oops, I need to get this under there. You get the idea. Use your cuticle stick, use small amounts of glue. Don't worry about moving too quickly. And take your time with this. The better you prepare your shapes, the easier it will be to machine applique them in place. So, I hope you enjoyed these tips, and I will be back with more on machine applique before too long.